Hey guys, what's up? Mad Season here, back with another video for you. Today we're going to talk about something that's probably happened to most everybody who's played MMOs at some point. Come home from work or school, relax, launch your favorite MMO, enter the world, jump around for a little bit, ruminating on what you want to do, and after a couple of minutes you decide that you want to log off because it is no longer fun, and a lot of the times you don't even know why. There's just this overpowering desire to log off and do anything other than play this game that you used to love. So today, for those who have been in that very position or are currently in it, I thought we would analyze this and answer the question just why and how MMOs become unfun. A good place to start is always with the basics, and we have to ask ourselves the question: what is the core fundamental appeal that drives people to play video games? Well, they're recreational. They are fun, which can mean different things to different people. For some, it's a long questing session. For others, it's an intense match in an FPS game, or maybe a mind-boggling puzzle, a thrilling horror, competitive team-based, high-end raiding, chill grinding with Netflix in the other monitor. And for the rest, it's erotic role-playing. The reasons why we play them can of course vary wildly. A common trait that they all share is the fact that they are optional. Think about the first time you picked one up. You didn't do so because you were going to fall behind on dailies or your raid needed you to tank. That would of course be impossible because you didn't yet have a character. You most likely started purely on the principle of, hey, that looks fun, I'd like to try that. So really, at the heart of all of this isn't necessarily to identify why you're no longer having fun. Rather, it's more to identify the reasons that compel you to play other than for the fun of it. We have to first identify exactly what this pressure is that's causing you to log in. And as it turns out, there are a plethora of reasons for that, whether that be inside through game mechanics and design, or even outside to some of the more psychological aspects of what compels us to play these social, addictive MMORPGs. I think it would be best to start off with the more straightforward stuff first, starting with FOMO, or fear of missing out. Right around the turn of the 2010s, gaming, particularly MMOs, started this transformation that was largely influenced by mobile gaming. It was around this time is when they really started to surge in popularity. The games were colorful, exciting, handheld hits of dopamine on the go, no matter where you were. Whether that be school, work, gym, bathroom, behind the wheel. In particular, they proved to be extremely effective in retaining players because they had one secret power, and that was the ability to grab their attention at all hours of the day because, of course, we always have our phones on us. They're like herpes, they're a constant companion. They tether us to the wonderful world of social media, as well as social contacts and addicting games. It's much easier to get our attention when we receive a ping on a device that's on hand 24/7, that a chest is ready to open, or some rewards have come in, or your daily and weekly timers have reset. And so, slowly over time, as they became more and more popular, other games, namely the MMO, saw this opportunity to adopt this very effective way of retaining players. Timers. Timers upon timers upon timers. Dailies, weeklies that are comprised of dailies, monthlies that are comprised of weeklies. Complete these daily quests, do your daily dungeons, scratch your ass daily, holiday events, battle passes, you name it. It's all over most every genre nowadays. Developers have really discovered the power of FOMO, and in a lot of cases the player isn't rewarded for playing as much as they are punished for not playing. But whatever the case may be, the reason to log in is no longer this pure wholesome fun of it. A new warrior has entered the ring, and it begins to dominate a significant percentage of the reason why players log in. And this is especially true in modern times, as MMOs have become more understood and the min-max optimization culture has taken form. And this isn't to say that any and all daily or weekly timers automatically equate to a game being bad or illegitimate. I think it's pretty reasonable to say that most would agree that there are places for them, just little nudges here and there to reward for some form of consistent play. But is when they begin to take this huge share of the pie and dominate almost every corner of the game is where it starts to become an issue, as the player can feel suffocated as they're constantly bombarded with timed task after timed task before they can actually do the fun thing that they originally clicked the play button for. It's a reduction of freedom. It's the developers guiding the player down this very controlled path of do these specific things and then you'll be free, which for a lot of players encroaches on the fun part of it, as it's antithetical to one of the core fundamental traits of the genre, and that's freedom. The MMO is sort of all about being thrown into this giant world with so many different things to do, whether that be questing, dungeons, raiding, PvP, economy, grinding, professions, achievements, challenges, to name a few. It is the buffet of the world of video games where you have this huge selection of variety to choose from. So in the cases where these focused niche daily timers start to really dominate, you definitely have this loss of this sense of freedom, and you can almost feel as if you have a list of chores to go through before you can get to the fun stuff. And for that reason, it's item number 1 on our list of things that compel you to log in, other than what initially seduced you to begin with: fun. So continue this logic in chasing the reasons that people log in for other than fun. Next we have addiction. It's no secret, MMOs are addictive. Probably the most addictive genre there is, right next to mobile gaming. RPGs themselves are very addicting. There's just something about constant long-form character progression that fires up our dopamine receptors. But the key here is that up until the late 90s, there was this safety measure in the fact that they ended. Eventually you go through a campaign and you have a credit screen awaiting you to tell you to do something else with your life. But now you take the same idea and you put the player into this virtual world that's to be shared with thousands of others and remove the ending, and you now have the recipe for one of the most addicting genres of game to ever exist. And beyond that, with the help of the previously mentioned FOMO, they're actually designed to be addictive. They're designed to create this maladaptive dependence where players develop an almost obsessive pattern of play. Roughly 50% of players self-report and consider MMOs to be addictive, with symptoms mirroring substance abuse disorders, such as constant thoughts about the game, irritability or stress after 24 hours without playing, failed quitting attempts. Trust me, I know a lot about that one. And as well as using the game to escape real-life problems. This addiction stems from a potent mix of psychological principles, game design tactics, social pressures, as well as individual vulnerabilities. Most people know that dopamine is the culprit, the neurotransmitter tied to pleasure and motivation. Logging in for a previously mentioned daily quest might yield a minor upgrade, but the key here is that this anticipation builds tension that's only relieved by playing. Studies have indicated, as the world of social media has evolved and has collectively been overflooding our brains with this constant stream of dopamine, it's actually rewired our reward systems, and it makes real-life tasks feel dull by comparison, leaving these online virtual spaces as the only potent source left for our beloved hit. This is quite often cited for studies relating to social media, but what many people fail to realize is that MMOs are social media. I would say it's more on the media side rather than social in comparison to the standard platform, but it's an online multiplayer game with communities and microcosms held within, and it's surrounded with these RPG-like characteristics to serve as its reward structure. Since it is multiplayer, progression is valued because it's relative, and developers recognize this as they often consult behavioral psychologists to optimize these loops, ensuring the grind, as repetitive and as low stakes as it may seem to be, keep the players hooked without burnout. This is more common in MMOs structured around vertical progression as opposed to horizontal, but they're made to be competitive. Humans are wired for rivalry, and MMOs amplify it with leaderboards, PvP arenas, rare cosmetics, dungeon scores, raid scores, item levels, and best-in-slot gear that remains best in slot until the next set is released. This creates a certain amount of pressure to keep up through once again, FOMO, as it creates this urgency out of fear of being left out of these activities if your character falls too far behind. This leads us to number 3 on our list, and that's social pressure. Joining a guild is many times a commitment. It means showing up for scheduled events like boss fights and raids, or PvP fights, where your absence lets the team down, and in many cases, some even describe it as a second job. You become a critical part of your group's success, and many watching, I'm sure, can relate to being in situations where sometimes you're not really feeling it, but it's raid time and everybody needs you, so you begrudgingly click the play button. But it's not all negative. This pressure can manifest in other more wholesome ways. Online friends can very well become a real and integral part of somebody's social circle and support system. While there's definitely no replacement for face-to-face social interaction, this is something that many people learned with the COVID-19 lockdowns. Real bonds can be formed and friendships can be made online, and this is especially true for those who may suffer from social anxiety, which happens to be a group of people that are particularly attracted to the genre due to the casual nature of how people interact with each other. You don't walk up and shake hands, maintain eye contact, and engage in awkward small talk. You click invite, you talk in text, and the focus is often centered around the task at hand rather than the individual person. But regardless, throughout all of this, friends groups have been formed, and many people relate to the fact that while they were initially attracted to the game for its gameplay, what kept them playing were the people who they played with, which certainly raises the stakes and the consequences of quitting the game if you're no longer having fun with it. For many people, this is their Sunday night football party or a weekend at the bar. For many, it's become a social activity that has this consistent and valuable place in their lives, even if they grow to dislike the game itself. I like to make the comparison of beer. By itself, it might taste like urine, but it does taste a little bit better if you enjoy it with friends. And it can be just as addictive, even if you don't enjoy the actual beer. And for those who are in this position, it becomes more of a means to an end. Is the platform for which they obtain something more valuable to them. This too is something that developers are very well aware of, and some have even built their entire game around it. Some of you might be familiar with Star Wars Galaxies, which held an economy and item system that was entirely player-driven. You had combat roles that got crafting materials, they would trade it to crafters, who would then turn them into weapons and armor for the combat professions to this time get resources for cooks to sell back to them for buff food, or resources to create doctor buffs, which were required for the end game. And then the doctors would then spend this money on a stripper to gain more buffs. Yeah, seriously. This model was called the weak tie interdependence system, where people you may not even know were necessary for your survival, and it was designed around the purpose of forcing interaction and cooperation and creating these online tight-knit communities. They wanted it such that if you were thinking of quitting, you weren't just leaving behind a silly video game, you were leaving behind a community who needed and valued you. Next, and we briefly mentioned this earlier, but we also have the fact that people use it as an escape. So now that we have this understanding of their heavy social nature and just how much it can influence players on a community and individual level, these aren't just virtual worlds. They're virtual online ecosystems with communities. There's an MMO called Second Life, which is a very appropriate name because due to their time-consuming nature, for many, the MMO is their second life. Although they aren't immune to change, they're certainly less volatile than the unpredictability of life. They become a comfort activity that serves as this escape from the unknown and the seriousness of real life and all of its stresses, to where no matter what's going on, you can always farm some mud crabs outside of Relica for some strength XP. This is certainly a double-edged blade that can be good or bad, depending on an individual basis, how much self-control that person has, and if they use them as more of a place to destructively run away, as opposed to perhaps a more constructive temporary respite to gather their breath and thoughts before they tackle whatever it is that they are temporarily escaping from. Humans love routine, and for many, even if they don't particularly enjoy it even, partly because of the previously mentioned dynamics like FOMO, which gets you to log in every day, it's still become this daily substantial part of their routine. And even if it's no longer really that much fun, they continue to play it because to remove it from their routine after such a long amount of time would be quite jarring, especially if they don't have anything else to fill in the void that's left behind. And beyond this, there's also a power struggle aspect to it. Again, this is something that's been studied in the world of social media, but also applies to MMOs, especially in terms of power, where you may feel overwhelmed from the stresses of life. MMOs let you embody this powerful avatar, lead raids, amass wealth, and to be the best at something, or at least to be more than what it is possible in your mundane personal life. And last on our list, finishing off again with a more psychological reason, we have the sunk cost fallacy. This is often referenced in the world of gambling. Player loses $100 in a game of blackjack. Well, he's got to keep playing to earn it back. I've already lost $100, what's 100 more? Maybe I can win it back. Until, of course, because the game is skewed mathematically towards the house, that 100 eventually becomes 500, 1,000, 2,000, so on. And for the MMO, while the money investment is rather tame compared to many hobbies, what's really at stake is time. It is by far the most time-consuming genre of any game. Not only are the activities themselves time-consuming, such as leveling and raiding, achievement hunting, or any of the 100 things that you can do, they are also, of course, without end, as the game is constantly updated and more obstacles to overcome are constantly being added. The MMO first gained mainstream popularity with the rise of World of Warcraft in 2004, which means we just passed the 2-decade mark since the breakout of the genre, and many people have been playing for all of those 20 years. So we have thousands of hours or even thousands of days of time and energy and memories sunk into just one single game. And you can see how this loops back to addiction, because this situation is created where quitting means essentially relinquishing a 20-year investment. It's not to say that they necessarily wasted the past 20 years of their life, of course. For some people, it's all about the journey, and the memories made along the way are worth it. But for the less abstract, motivated people, it can feel as if their time could have been better spent elsewhere, especially if they have grown to dislike the game that they're playing. However, quitting would force them to confront that uncomfortable reality, and so they just never quit, even if the enjoyment and fun has long left them. So, FOMO, addiction, social pressure, escapism, sunk cost fallacy. If you remember, the goal of this video was to identify the reasons why you log in that aren't fun, and these are just a few of the many, although I would say that they are the most common. It's a very complicated situation that's highly dependent on each individual person. At the end of the day, you just have to remember what initially drew you to it to begin with, and that's just to have fun. If you find this word falling lower and lower on your priority list of why you play, that's when it's time for a break. Forcing it eventually leads to burnout 9 times out of 10. I've rarely seen people try to tough through it and they just magically start enjoying it again. I personally have taken many breaks in my time. I've picked up other hobbies and focused my efforts elsewhere, and by doing that, all of these other pressures begin to fade, and the fun part begins to once more climb the rankings of what influences me to play, until eventually I decide that I want to play it again. If you do find yourself in this position of playing them even if they aren't fun, you've probably gathered that the solution lies in once more making it optional, to remove all obligations and pressures other than fun as your reasons to play it. Usually that involves just walking away from it, and it might take some time, depending on your level of burnout. For some people it's a week, for others it's months, years, and some never come back, and that's fine. Don't pressure yourself to play. Don't let the developers pressure you into playing with their various addiction-fueled design choices, and really just play when you feel like it. Play when you think to yourself, hey, you know what? That sounds like fun. Which, again, is the entire point of video games to begin with. But with that being said, I hope that you found this video fun or helpful. Like it if you liked it, because I will see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.